Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our summer knowledge session brought to you by the MENA Fintech Association. For those who are not familiar with us, we are Bridge. We are the Fintech marketing mini community within the MENA Fintech Association. We are a group of marketeers with all backgrounds from payments, banking, digital assets, Web3 and beyond. And we use, time for such sessions to share knowledge, to make sure that we support one another, that we answer queries from our members. So we've brought to you that micro-marketing lesson from startup to unicorn today, which will be presented by Mark Cousins. Mark has been in the market for many, many years. He's a fintech marketer OG, and I will let him tell you more about his experience and his role and his impact with the region as well. And we will have the session for about an hour, including question and answers. You can either raise your hand, unmute to ask a question, or drop them into the chat. And what I'd love to have at the end of the session is also maybe ideas of other subjects you'd like us to cover on forthcoming sessions. But without any further ado, let's get us started and welcome Mark together.
I'm Mark Cousins. My background is 10 years setting up high-performance marketing functions. I did this before it was fintech, before it was cool. And my background has fortunately involved 2 IPOs. So Worldline IPO'd for over €2 billion, and Marqeta more recently IPO'd for $16 billion. So what I want to share with you today is frameworks that I've used. I want to give you perspectives on marketing, what's worked well for me. I want to be able to give you ideas to take away that you might be able to implement, that you might be able to view your own marketing efforts with, which are going to help you take you forward. So I think when we look at marketing generally, it's quite a challenging environment out there. I don't come across too many marketing departments where they're having it easy. There's lots changed over the last couple of years. Certainly in Europe, marketing budget's down, headcount. It's challenging to differentiate yourself. And really, how do we counter these differences? How do we counter these challenges that we're up against on a daily basis? And I think there's a lot of the consulting I've done over the last 6 months since I left Marqeta. What I've come across is a lot of broken maths. There's a lot of companies where RevOps have come up with the criteria for what a good client looks like or what a good prospect looks like, and simply the ask from marketing is bigger than market addressable size. So I think that's one of the challenges which is quite common out there at the moment. I think secondly, what that's driven is really a focus of tactical over strategic. I think what I'm seeing is a lot of companies or a lot of organizations, especially in the B2B space, which is my area of focus, they're struggling to hit the targets or have struggled to hit the targets. And that's what's forcing. When I look at marketing, I kind of look at it on an axis. I kind of look at it as your total relevant market in the middle. You've got your strategy at the top on the horizontal. You've got your tactical. You always got to leave room for tactical initiatives. And then across the horizontal is you've got your analytics driving marketing and creativity. But unfortunately, what I see a lot of today is knee-jerk reactions, which is forcing a lot of tactical activity driven off of the current analytical situation. So it's not allowing companies to plan and put a proper marketing plan across the whole year and stick to that. I think in terms of where I come from as a marketing leader, I think my first challenge for all marketing departments is what is working, what's not working, and how do you kill the distraction activity? I see marketing getting involved in lending a hand across the organization, whether it's helping comms, whether it's helping HR. They're not helping themselves often. And then there's a lot of activity within marketing departments which isn't necessarily delivering the value it needs to. I think at any one point there's probably 30% of marketing activities not doing what it needs to do. So there needs to be a mentality within your team, within your department, about what is distraction and what's going to get us to where we need to get to. I think also great marketing needs constant inspiration. And for me, that is not looking at your competition. If you look at your competition, you copy your competition, you will become your competition. You will not stand out. Great marketing activity for me, actually, the gold sits within your company. I want my marketing team to be gliders. I want them to be interacting with all of the key areas of my company. I want them to be talking to customer success on a regular basis and talking to customers. That's where you get the nuggets, the gold, the insight, what is actually customers are talking about, what is their language. So I want my team to be entwined with products. I want them absolutely on sales calls and hearing the challenges my sales team gets. I want them with C-suite, hearing the conversations the C-suite have had. But I also want my teams to be focused outside. For me, I look at business to consumer marketing for inspiration for where B2B marketing should be. And I've always got a portfolio of brands that I'm looking at, what activities they're doing, and how can I take some of their principles and instill it into my own work. Consumer marketing is often more interesting than business marketing or B2B marketing. I think for me as well, I think there's always the organizations shouting about, from various different quarters about what are your real USPs, and every organization has a line of key product features that they think are really the winning features. But actually, it goes back to that talking about to the consumer and having close relationships with the customer as to really what is it that's moving the needle. And I call this the shadow side. So if every marketing department will get hung up on certain things, but actually really what is it that your customers actually value, and what should you really be talking about? And I think, my experience over the last 10 years, I've not built big departments. I've managed people of 30, I've managed people of 15 in roles, but ultimately the highest marketing performing team I ever have is when I'm working with 2 or 3 other people. And I think you can go far with fewer people than a larger team. This was my setup at Marqeta. All my competitors had marketing teams of between 8 and 15 people. I had 3. Myself leading the function, driving the strategy, the thought leadership. I had someone in events and content, and someone in the tech campaigns, reporting and web. That person will probably be called a go-to-market engineer now. And then around the edges, I would always bring in really competent freelancers who were an extended part of my team. I'd never create a role if that role was only 60%. I operated on a sprint mentality, having meetings most mornings, and found that you generally can deliver with this structure and scale. I'd say I'd have no problem scaling up to 30 million revenue with this structure in place. Obviously, depends what your marketing goals are. I think a lot of people and a lot of companies I've talked about and have done consulting with over the last 6-7 months, they're in what I call a challenger position. And I always say, have a mentality of celebrating that challenger position, because for all the challenges you generally have, bigger companies will have bigger challenges. So you might be looking at competitors saying they've got 10 times our budget. That's great, but they've probably got 10 times the processes. They're an oil tanker, you're a speedboat. How can you use your creativity and initiative to outpunch them? And you generally can. So if you're in a challenger position today, I know it's hard work, but really truly celebrate it. I think, the more you get involved in marketing, the more you see of marketing, what you recognize is that, especially on deals which are big, sizable deals, which is also my background, which tend to take a long time to come to fruition, in some cases years. The end procurement will always know who they're looking at to start with, in terms of who they want to narrow down from who they're going to ultimately buy from. So your job as a marketer is to look at the total relevant market and to be obsessive about that. It's to understand your buyer committee across that market. And it's ultimately about driving awareness and content strategy into that market or into those individuals. That is what you should be obsessing about day in, day out. And I think, as marketers, yes, we're trying to build awareness in the marketplace. We're trying to create connection. But ultimately, we're trying to build trust. It's the trust that is critical to actually, bringing warm prospects along to an actual sale. And I think when I look at marketing activity, it's easy to shout about your brand in terms of building blogs or case studies or even getting some PR out. Where trust comes from is the harder aspects of marketing. It's about thought leadership, it's about educational resources, about building communities. Those are bigger initiatives. They take more time, they take more cost, but they're going to yield better results in the long run. And it's about how you sell that commitment into the organization of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, and what you're trying to build. The other thing with marketing is it's about consistency. For me, I always look at the key actors in the markets that I'm going into and the areas I want to win. I look at who I need to get on my side, who I need to be pushing, and who needs to be rooting for me or my brand. I look at the analysts, the advisors, the consultants, the key media, the key partners, the thought leaders. And I look at the channels, and it's about weaving this consistency through the channels with the key actors. When I talk to people about content and I talk to people about getting a content engine going, so many people struggle to really find that consistency that I just talked about. But there's so much out there already. There's so many, this is just pulling out some reports from some of the bigger consultancies of the world, McKinsey's. One of the first things I did when I got to Marketo was just look at what the industry was pushing out. And I just started going out to these individuals and saying, look, can we feature you on the blog? Can we do a webinar with you? They've written the reports. You can write on the back of other people's content. So I think for me, you don't always have to self-generate. You can also associate yourself with great content that's already out there, and therefore further your awareness, further your credibility. Thought leadership for me has always been something that I've been incredibly passionate about. I always want to try and own a domain, own a space. So much of the thought leadership that I see out there is nothing more than a solution brochure dressed up, and that's not thought leadership. Thought leadership, first of all, has to be educational. It has to be focused. It has to have a viewpoint. I think for me, I always want to use thought leadership to also generate positive PR out there. And to get PR column inches, you need credibility. To get credibility, you need to involve things like research. So I always, when I do thought leadership, I tend to always build in a research aspect to that. Media wants key stats. They want things to be substantiated. I'll always use established industry commentators. I'll use prospects. I'll use thought leadership as a tool to bring people into the company that we want to do business with. And I'll always involve customers. What I won't do is oversell the products, my products, our company's products. They're always a PS at the end. By the way, our company can help you with this. They're never the main part of the thought leadership. I think when you look now, certainly at a lot of the channels out there, you've got to look at videos being your foundational layer. If you're not video first, because of the way that we're all consuming information now, because of the pressure of time, you're doing something wrong. You really need to look at how you're going to build video into your marketing on an ongoing basis. Content, I think, we've obviously seen what large language models can do now. We've seen, copy AI and all the AI copy platforms that can generate on an ongoing basis mountains of content for you. I think for me, I'm always obsessed with indexing organically, pushing out content that gets me to the top of the ratings or the rankings on Google. And for that, you've got to be constantly focused on things like keyword prioritization and writing new sections for your website, and understanding certainly now how AI operates, that expertise. AI is pulling from Reddit communities, AI is pulling from Wikipedia. So you now got that dual push of organically indexing on the search engines, but also the AI engines as well. But often people launch a website and forget about it. For me, it's an ongoing mission. This is your shop window. And shop windows, yes, they're seasonal, but they're always changing it up. They're always merchandising. They're always freshening. They're always adding. I think also I always want to remove the friction from customer journeys. I want potential customers finding interesting content on my website, which means that you have to be looking at the different stakeholders. You have to be tailoring content for stakeholders. There's a stat from HockeyStack there that I'm not going to read out, but make your web content interesting, ungate it, build knowledge repositories, put demos on there, showcase your sales team, showcase your sales process. Just make it a portal where people can be lost and engaged and want to find out more. They want to contact you. And then I think we reach a bit of an interesting intersection in marketing generally. A lot of companies had a defensive moat 2 or 3 years ago, whether it was your APIs, your webhooks, your sandbox, whatever it was that made you slightly different from a tech perspective. That defensive moat's generally gone now. It can be anything that you've got that's OpenAI's can be copied in an instant. So I think the marketing debate moves on now from just differentiation. It really is about distinction. Think about the colors of IKEA. Think about the Coca-Cola bottle and the outline. They're synonymous with brands. So the challenge is how do you, yes, you want to try and differentiate, but it's not easy, but how do you become distinct? How do you become known? And I think for me, if you pick the top 5 companies in any sector now and you put the website up, it's all the sea of sameness. And I start really with, please be brave, people. Please challenge. Please do something different. How often do you pull up a website and it looks something like this, whereby, there's all these sort of questions here, know what you need. How can we help you get there fast? Confused by too many platform providers? Listen to why our customers choose us. No, typically what we have is a headline and then acres of space, white space, and that seems to be the current format. But A/B test things. I'm not saying this format would work, but A/B test things. Be brave. Constantly be challenging yourselves in terms of how you can set yourself apart, as opposed to being the same. I think being brave doesn't always have to cost money. Being creative is often the answer to things. When I first started in Marketo in 2019 in Europe, we had no customers, and the challenge was how do you look as though you got credibility when you got no customers in region? And I thought about it, and I sat there and thought, well, perhaps if I go out to all the big card programs in Europe who we really want to be working with, and I ask if I can interview them, and I ask if I can talk about what it is they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, what their proposition is. And I started doing that, and they all started coming back and saying, yeah, I would love to be on your blog. So before I knew it, I was interviewing bNext and 𝗁𝗲, and we were putting them on the blog, and we didn't not say they were Marketo customers, but we didn't say they were Marketo customers. But a lot of people jumped and put 2 and 2 together. And suddenly we built this mountain of awareness and mountain of credibility. The end result of this is probably that, it took me, a couple of hours in outreach, and then I'd meet these people, then I'd connect them with a copywriter. So the whole initiative was probably, very, very time and cost effectively beneficial. But the end output was significant. So I'd always challenge yourself when you're looking at a problem, think round it, think at other angles, get 4 or 5 people in a room and just see how you could do things differently. And it's not always an expensive option. Sometimes it's just having the braveness to go there. I think the marketing tech trap is a difficult one now because there's so much tech out there. There's so much, especially from an AI perspective, there's solutions arriving every single week that prove to solve your challenge. What I would say about tech is you can carry on procuring tech till the cows come home. And certainly at the end, when we're in Marketo, I had more tech solutions than we knew what to do. There's a couple of things with regards to tech, how does it all connect it together to provide and drive those insights? How is it being used beyond marketing? But But ultimately, I think a lot of it comes down to processes. The technology might get you a certain way, but if you don't have the processes mapped out between the go-to-market team, then you're always going to fail to a degree. But be careful procuring lots of different tech. Be really obsessive about what it is you're trying to achieve, because ultimately tech can be a distraction as well. I think these are the three. I call these the Holy Trinity. This is where I've spent so much time in my life. This is where CEOs, SVPs have spent time coming up to me going, Mark, you've got the technology now. How do we improve the lead scoring? How do we really drill down on that lead source attribution? And we should be better at really understanding the ultimate customer journey. If we can get that nailed, then we can replicate it, or we can put more emphasis into certain parts of that customer journey. I've spent many, many hours. I've spent a lot of time with my marketing tech leads trying to get to the bottom of these. You can get so far, is what I will say. Don't aim for perfection in these areas, because you can burn a lot of hours. Get to where you can get to and move on. I think we've probably got to about 20 slides into this presentation. I've not really mentioned AI yet, and AI is just so fundamental now to marketing. And I've had this question thrown at me so much over the last 6 months in terms of the consulting work I've done. What do we bring in? What do we buy in? What AI solutions should we be using? And I think you almost have to look at a couple of areas in your marketing orgs. What are your known deficiencies? Where are you failing? And how can AI help you? What is taking up all your time? How can AI help you? What is taking up your cost? What is consuming your marketing budget? How can AI help you? And what's forever on your wish list, but you're never getting around to? And where can AI help you? I think if I'm a marketing leader, a CMO, a VP of marketing, and you don't have a plan with regards to how AI is helping you, it's not enough to say that I use ChatGPT or the team's trained upon ChatGPT. That's not going to get you credibility with your CEO. You have to have a plan. For me, one of the fundamental best use cases of AI I personally think of is get your sales team partnership solutions to all use an AI note taker when they're on client conversations. Synthesize the output of those conversations, use it to build great content, use it to build great insights. That for me is a key starting point. I think events is something that we're all heavily involved in as marketers, especially B2B marketers. I am really obsessive about how I manage events. I have a pre-event campaign. I have a whole set of activity that occurs at an event, and I have a post-event, and they're three separate things. They're obviously interlinked. The pre-event, I look at all last year's speakers, event sponsors, delegates. I look at all this year's speakers, event sponsors, and delegates, have campaigns going out to all those. What I don't have on this slide here is I also look at who our target addressable market list is, who's likely to be going. If I have spare budget, I will procure tickets, a pot of tickets, and I will try and get or invite some of my key targets along. But I think, the outcome, the difference between a good event and a bad event is really about micromanagement and the processes throughout the whole go-to-market org, pre-event, the event, post-event. I think triggers and intent signals, the always-on engine of marketing is where we really need to be going to. I call it pushing on an open door, but every organization should have the 6, 8, 10 triggers, which are signifying that a prospect might be in market, that there might be a conversation there to be opened up. And it's really about how you're combining these triggers. It's really about the technology you've got that's actually highlighting the triggers. Have you got a tech stack that can, indicate that someone's moved role and is actually in a new company, and they're likely to be looking at, your product or a replacement of their existing product? How's that notifying your sales team or your marketing team? Have you got Slack notifications set up? I think we're moving slightly away from this world of campaigns into a world of always on, an always on marketing engine. And talking about campaigns, I think what I've seen more from campaigns really is about how to fail right from the outset. Um, I've seen everything in campaigns, from going for the maximum audience size to, really unconvincing call to actions, or not even really understanding why we're running a campaign other than we need to get another campaign out. So I think look hard at campaigns. I think we need to move more to micro campaigns, really being obsessed about the audience we're talking to and why we're talking to them, and what the call to actions are. We need to move away from this mass sort of campaign mentality that a lot of companies have still got. My experience of campaigns is an ever decreasing response rate, which is typically greeted with, let's spin up another campaign, and that is not the answer. I think my mentality and view of marketing is moving more towards it's an experiments lab, and really in the pursuit of what works, almost having a winner stays on mentality. So you look at your suite of ongoing tactics, what is working, what's not, but you've always got a waiting list of what you want to try, right? And you're adding to that waiting list continually. You don't necessarily know if that waiting list of tactics is going to yield anything better than your current ongoing tactics. But I think that has to be, we have to give ourselves as marketers the breathing space. We have to create the room and opportunity to try new things. And if once again, if I'm a CEO, I'd be asking the question, what you're trying next? What are you stopping? What are you trying next? Account-based marketing, this is one of my favorite topics, and it might be one that we can do a deep dive in because I've got a lot of viewpoints on this. But what account-based marketing isn't, it's not technology, which is what all the big platforms have kind of sold us on. Account-based marketing is an alignment. It's an alignment between sales, marketing, partnerships, and your exec team on the accounts that you want to win and how you're going to go about winning those accounts, right? Ultimately, account-based marketing can work off an Excel spreadsheet, and that's how I have run it in the past, right? It's about you as a team coming together on an ongoing basis, ideally once a month, and looking at the progress with those accounts. From a marketing perspective, I've always used my output as a form of account-based marketing. My thought leadership, I'm involving prospects in. My webinars, I'm involving prospects in. My events, I'm finding a way to get my prospects into an exclusive meal at the end of an event. My blogs, I'm finding a way to get prospects in. Yeah, I'm using marketing as a warm opening, a way to facilitate relationships. And that's the way I see ABM. Yes, technology is very useful and helpful, but really ABM is a long-term mentality about the accounts that you want to win. And it's about three functions working holistically and together to actually bring those accounts into the organization. I think, we just talked about account-based marketing, and this is why it's so important, because going back to that campaigns basis, you look at your total addressable market or your total relevant market. Inside any one organization, you have your SDRs, you have your marketing team, you have your sales team. They're all constantly bombarding prospects or potential prospects. Layer on your competitors, and your prospects are getting really hit on an ongoing basis. So what you want to be doing is working out how you can do this differently, how you can actually add joy to your prospect's life through the interactions. What is it that sets you apart from your competitors in your outreach? I think this is really interesting now in terms of where we're going. We talked earlier about building trust, and I think trust is just so fundamental. We've talked about distinction versus differentiation. It's really difficult to get, that differentiation aspect, but one area of differentiation is your culture. That can't be replicated, it can't be copied. And how does your culture manifest itself? Well, how are your employees talking about you on LinkedIn? How's your exec team talking about you on LinkedIn? I've put the example here of 𝗏𝗏𝗏. A couple of these guys have actually left 𝗏𝗏𝗏 now, but there was one point where 𝗏𝗏𝗏 had such a fierce social media presence, from Grant, George, and Justin. It was just a wall. When I talked to those guys, it was a wall of positivity, by the way. And when I talked to those guys, they weren't short of inbound leads coming out of LinkedIn. But you've actually now reached the stage where you've got founders and CEOs running their companies. And on LinkedIn, you look at Adam Robinson, and we'll show a bit of Adam in a second. Yeah, almost just talking about the pain points, talking about the week-to-week progress. And whether that comes across as authenticity or raw or whatever, there's no doubt these guys are creating LinkedIn as their #1 sales channel. So my challenge to all of you as marketing leaders is, how can you empower your employees? How can you enable your C-suites to really have a presence on LinkedIn? Because it is really one way to differentiate and also one way to be distinctive. We talked a bit about Adam. This is what Adam does on a weekly basis. The guy is obsessed with LinkedIn, and if you don't follow him, it might be worth just jumping in and just having a look what he does. It is the other end of a spectrum in terms of really pushing LinkedIn. But he's built a very credible business from nothing with a very few employees, just utilizing LinkedIn. Pitch Club. I've probably talked a bit or intimated really about togetherness and the go-to-market team. One of the things I've found, which has been incredibly helpful in terms of getting everyone on the same page, building interdepartmental relationships, is having a monthly pitch club, choosing topics, getting the team together, asking the team to pitch on those topics. And it's really about creating camaraderie, but it's also creating a safe environment to fail. And it's also about learning from each other. I found it quite useful for marketing to own this and to facilitate this. It might be seen more as a commercial aspect. But I've found this a hugely valuable asset in the companies that I've managed to enable it within. And following on from sort of Pitch Club, I think one of the challenges that we all have as a marketing function is, that synchronization across the other go-to-market functions. And really what I've always tried to create is, an environment where it's love, not war. I've been in organizations where you sit there and you fight over a lead and you fight over a lead source. It's not fun. Where I got to in a place at one point in Marketo in Europe is where we actually broke out go-to-market as a separate function, as a separate sort of source, lead channel, if you like. We'd have a monthly meeting and we're really honest. All of the leads that were coming in, we'd sit there with the CEO of Europe and we'd go through them. And sales would talk about their contribution, marketing would talk about their contribution, partnerships as well. And we would align it accordingly, because the truth is, attribution, it's not linear. It's all over the place. Everyone's had a role to play, right? But it feels awful when various other functions are assuming credit for something, or assuming credit for a win. And ultimately, where we need to get to is a unified growth factory. That's where I want to get to, where you're moving away from sales, SDR, marketing. You're looking at the holistic effort of the whole go-to-market organization. And then we're moving into the metrics. And for me, we're in so much data, so much can be measured these days. But I think what you need to move away from is what I call vanity metrics, which are almost total addressable market metrics. So perhaps you're measuring web traffic, your keywords, share of voice, and thousands of other metrics. But I think you need to start really honing in on true intent metrics, which is what I call total relevant market metrics. You've got those 100 accounts that you're absolutely obsessed with winning. How are you doing? What's your engagement with those 100 accounts look like? Where are they in the pipeline? What's coming through from that 100 accounts? And what's the quality of the deals that marketing are bringing in? I think that's where we should be putting our effort. And for me, the long game really is a short game. I've been in situations where I've owned the whole marketing department, including the brand, including demand gen functions. I've been in a situation where I'm just responsible for demand gen. I'll tell you, if you invest in building your brand and you focus on it, and it will take years in some cases, because some of these deals, as I intimate, especially if they're big deals, they will take considerable amount of time to come in. But if you're consistently building your brand, you will become a magnet in the marketplace. People gravitate towards you at the right time when they're ready to make a decision. When you're just focused on a dedicated lead gen engine and you're constantly putting campaigns out there, it is incredibly hard work. It'll be spiky. You know, you might be doing events and you'll do well in events, and then you'll try and get back to your campaigns and your sales loft outreach. It's not that easy. I would always, and perhaps controversial from me, if I was starting a new marketing function today and someone was giving me a significant budget, you know what, I'll probably hold off somewhat in terms of building out a dedicated lead gen function. I would probably put a very solid case that building the brand is the right way to go. So hopefully in this presentation, I started at the outset by saying, yes, marketing is a bit challenging. It's a bit of a tricky place at the moment. But hopefully I've shone a light on some of the areas that you can focus on, which might help you. It might determine your journey and give you a different view of where you might go. But I kind of close on asking, what's your defensive moat? What can't be copied by your competitors? What white space can you own? Because I think that's really where you want to hone in. And the last question I'll kind of leave you with is, what's the digital rebound, right? And how are you guys planning for the digital rebound? Because I think we're in this world where everything is so ultra digital. You know, do your customers crave real relationships? Do they crave exclusivity? And what are you doing to build that into your marketing plan, into your future plans at all? Because I think there's a point of saturation that we're fast approaching, where we're getting targeted by email constantly, we're getting hit on LinkedIn. You know, I think there's going to be a new space. And I think, if I had marketing budget and once again I was in charge of marketing department, I'd be looking at how I build exclusive communities. I'd be looking at how I build, events of value, real physical interactions. Would it be useful, Nadia, if I just answered a couple of the questions that have come up? Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat as I was going along.
Yes, there's one on the chat, and I will welcome everyone to either raise your hand if you want to voice any additional questions or drop them on the chat if you prefer. So let's go through the chat questions as a start.
Hi, Carolina. Right. Hi, Mark. How do you manage the relationship with sales team leadership on the lead scoring customer journey optimization? Look, I think the first thing, Carolina, is I always try and I've always found there's a bit of a tension between sales and marketing, no matter which organization I've been in. I think the first thing is to build that relationship with sales, and create a space where everyone is free to have an open dialogue without any judgment. And as we got to the space where ultimately, creating that go-to-market lead scoring for me was the safest way to do the attribution, but it required utter honesty. And the way I did that was to get my CEO of Europe involved in the whole process. And that way, tensions were eradicated very quickly. Problems were unblocked incredibly quickly. But it was also about getting into this cadence of having meetings with the sales team. We're meeting bi-weekly on account-based marketing. We're meeting monthly in depth to go through the pipeline. So I think it's also about processes as well, and having that cadence in place. But it's never going to be perfect. And it's always going to be a bit tricky and a bit rocky. Right. Zaina, hi, Mark. Thanks for the session. How often should you really post on LinkedIn and a blog to get results? Look, I think this one's really close to my heart, right? Because I am not someone who's typically open to sharing my life on LinkedIn. But the last 6 months as I've been consulting, I've realized that, LinkedIn's one of the areas I've really failed to sort of get to grips with. So I've been posting once a week. I think really it's about having confidence in your LinkedIn strategy and what you're posting about and why you're posting and what you're trying to do. For me, I'm posting about some of it's about my life lessons, learnings. Some of it's just about stuff that interests me. If you look at my LinkedIn posts, some of them about photography, some about art, just things that really interest me. I want to be writing in a very authentic way. I don't outsource my writing to AI. So I'd say, what are you comfortable talking about? What are your natural passions? And really just go from there. That's about personal brand. With regards to a business brand, I think the easiest way is to start by building really great content and just asking your team to push that out on LinkedIn. So whether it's about press releases, whether it's about thought leadership blogs that have just come out. I think that's one of the great things we got going at Marqeta is we just used to on Slack we'd be like there's latest blog, those who are comfortable, please push that out. But the more of your company you can get supporting on LinkedIn, the bigger the voice that you get out there, the better for your company all round. Right. So that was Zena. MENA, how do you convince companies, especially fintech startups, on the importance of proper brand building from the get-go? Not easy. Really not easy, because brand building tends to involve budgets, and budgets are the challenging things at this particular moment in time, and have been for the last couple of years. But I'd say is how do you start? How do you put a convincing plan together? How do you share a vision of where you're trying to get to and what the brand is trying to convey? So I don't know, perhaps you want to be known as the authority on something. You want to be known as the key educational resource on something. So what does your brand plan look like on that? And what do you need to do? Do you need to build a portal? How are you going to socialize it? You're going to have weekly, monthly get-togethers. You're going to have a team that's, a wider industry team that's contributing to that portal. I think you have to share the vision, and then start appending sort of, what it means from a budget perspective to get to that vision. And then the most important thing is get your C-suite on board, get your CEO on board, and get it pushed down from there. But ultimately, what you really need to be doing is ring fencing funds for brand building. And there needs to be an understanding within the C-suite and the wider audience that this is something that's not necessarily going to contribute to measurable results instantly. It just doesn't happen like that. It's going to take time. And brand building is layers. For me, it's layers of activity, whether it's your thought leaderships, whether it's your blogs, whether it's your events, it's all layers. So yeah, it's not an easy one, but you need to have a real well thought out plan, and don't just go and ask for a budget up front. Say I need 200,000 euros to build brand. Have a plan and attach the budget to it. Get buy-in on the vision. Vinay, AI has altered the approach to marketing team strategy. What does the initial team, what's the initial team for a startup, digital products and consumer focused look like today? Vinay, I think that's a really fascinating question. And I think the scary thing is we're not too far away from some people assuming that marketing is a one-man operation linked in with AI. Depends how much funding you've got as a startup. It depends how much budget you've got. But I think the team that I showed you, I think you can do a heck of a lot. I'm involved with one startup at the moment doing some consulting. They have someone doing marketing 2 days a week. They have me giving some input, and we'll bring some freelance resource in as well. I think what an organization's got to realize is if you don't have a dedicated marketing leader in place, and you don't give that leader resource either internally or externally, there's only so much that can be achieved, because marketing now, when you break down all the subdivisions of marketing, all the sub responsibilities, it's an incredibly complicated discipline. So the organization has to be realistic about what can be achieved with resources. So if it's limited resources, you now have some limited outputs. But I think ideally, if you're a 10 million pound funded startup or whatever, you need a team probably with about 3 people in place with a budget in place. AI is great, but it shouldn't be leading your marketing. It should be something that's assisting you, something that's helping you get better in the efficiency stakes. Right, Tara, how do you measure success of events? What's a successful event for you? Right, first of all, it really depends on what your sales cycle looks like. How many sales marketing making per year, or what marketing is supposed to be contributing to. I don't know, you can use a benchmark of 40-50%. That's a high performing marketing function in terms of what they're delivering to end one outputs. I think your sales cycle is a really interesting one, because this is what happens or has happened with me for events. At Marqeta, my sales cycle could be 36 months, right? So you sit there in the immediate aftermath of an event, and you look at it and you look what's in the pipe, and you try and make some judgment calls. An event can be deemed successful 2 years later when 2 of those deals have closed. and they're significant deals. So it is really, really hard. Certainly, I found it incredibly hard at Marqeta to make that judgment call. But ultimately, there's a gut instinct that comes in with events. I'm looking at how much effort is taken up by an event, and if the whole marketing department is suddenly off, taken away, working on an event, and a month has elapsed and everyone's all out, doing everything you need to do for an event. I look at what else could be done. Is that the right use of the time? So you got to kind of benchmark that with the outputs from an event. But look, you've got to do everything you can from an event. You can't turn up and just say it's a brand building exercise, right? That's not going to fly with anyone. So your event has to deliver leads. It absolutely has to. And to the slide that I shared early, just be absolutely obsessive about contacting and making sure that everyone knows you're there, and that you're actually booking real meetings for your sales team, for your SDR, for your C-suites. And that's why your outreach has to start really early. For Money 2020, my outreach starts 3 to 4 months before the event. Right. Hi, Mark. Thanks for the session. How can businesses effectively tailor their LinkedIn content strategies to engage diverse audiences across regions like the Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific, whilst positioning the same product, keeping in mind language preferences and varying engagement patterns? Brilliant question. And I don't think they can, in a nutshell, without having slightly separate strategies for each region. I think I had in my previous life, when I worked for one organization, we had a strategy of what was fixed in region, what was flexible in region, and what was free in region with regards to content, with regards to lead gen. And I really think you have to look at that when you're a global org and you're across multiple cultures, multiple territories. One size does not fit, and that needs to be taken into consideration. So I think some stuff will work right across, but you're going to have to tailor. So and how you go about it and what resource you put against that goes back against what value this is delivering and what capability you've got in your organization. But effectively, you have to have slightly different strategies for different regions. Some superb questions there. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to get to know you briefly and to have the opportunity to present here. I hope you found some of this of value, and I hope you can take some of this away. I am on LinkedIn. If anyone ever wants to reach out for a chat, now's a great time because I'm in a bit of a hiatus period. I've got a bit of a downtime at this particular moment for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So happy to chat to any of you individually about the challenges you might have, and if I can offer some guidance or some thoughts, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thanks, Mark. This was a very valuable session. So looking at the amount of questions as well. We'll have additional sessions organized during the summer. So expect from us some invitation moving forward. If there are topics of interest, feel free to share those with us. You can use, marketing at MENA-fintech.org, or just drop them in the chat as well. So we look forward to hosting you for additional session. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.